Hi, this is Ken with Letus, and today we're going to learn a little bit about going ahead and doing a calibration. This video is specifically talking about calibration with firmware version 2.55 v9 or later. Many of you might have that version. I'm using 2.56 v2. There were some definite changes between 2.43 v6 and these later ones, the 2.55 and later, that completely changed the way that calibration is done, and so I wanted to make sure that we covered this in a separate video. The first thing actually we're going to do before we even do calibration here is I wanted to talk a little bit about how do you know if your calibration even needs to be redone. And we'll come over here to the monitoring tab, and you can see some of this data here. We have 6 values here, 3 for accelerometers, 3 for gyros, and we want this value. The values here for the gyros, when the motors are completely off, like this, we're not touching it, these values here should be between -3 and 3. And of course they're going to vary a little bit. This looks pretty good. I mean, every once in a while you get some strange reading, like maybe I'm touching the table or something like that. That looks like what it was. Now up here, we want the ACCZ to be approximately, 512 is ideal, but it can vary some. In fact, I've seen it as high as, maybe even 530, and it's not that big of a deal. What you really want here is these values should be very low. And you want these between -7 and 7, ideally. -5 to 5 is very, very good. If you get it closer to 0 than that, maybe we should hold some kind of drawing for the best calibration. The trick, though, is you can tell that I'm a little bit off, but the trick is that this has to happen when this box is completely level. Okay, so if I were to take this and put a level on it, right, now my values actually look pretty good. And as you can see, we were under the camera IMU, right? That's the one in this box right here. And now we look at the frame IMU, so we click over here on frame IMU, and we come back to the monitoring tab to get the data coming from the frame IMU. Now, you can see the same thing here. The gyro values look very good between -3 and 3. And here the ACCZ is around 512. And these values here are both excellent, right? They're both between -7 and 7. So this calibration is actually pretty good, but I'm going to show you how to do it anyway. So the first thing we need to do is realize what exactly we're dealing with here. There are 2 IMUs. One is in here. This is the camera IMU inside here, and the frame IMU is inside this spot right here. And they're just chips, and they have both a gyro and an accelerometer in them. And so we need to do basically 4 different types of calibrations. You have a gyro and accelerometer here, and a gyro and accelerometer here in the frame IMU. Well, we're going to go ahead and here in the basic screen, and you can see that we have the buttons here for camera IMU and frame IMU. I'm actually going to go ahead and do the easiest ones first. I'm going to come down here to this button that says IMU Calibration Helper. And this is brand new here. It's not in 2.43 v6. And so I'm going to go ahead and just calibrate the gyros first. So, and I don't have to have a specific orientation for this. I just have to have it completely stationary for 5 or 10 seconds before it gets started there. And so I can have it in this orientation, I can have it over here, but you just want to make sure it's not moving. So it's really important to not have the motors on because, of course, this thing is extremely accurate and you want it to be completely stationary. Don't be putting your hands on the table or anything like that. I will go ahead and do hit the calibrate button here. And then you notice that there's a second set of buttons here for switching between camera and frame. So I'll come over here to hit frame. Okay, so now we have those 2 done already. Those are 2 really easy ones. I'm actually going to close out of here, and I want to show you something else because some of you may have done that and you didn't get a beep. Okay, and you're kind of wondering, why am I not getting beeps here? You will see this. Notice here it says gyroscope calibration started. And that is helpful, except that it doesn't actually go away when you're done. So that can also be a little bit alarming. But if you come over here to the service tab, you'll notice here the beep with motors button. If you do not, like let's say you're just connected with the USB cable and you don't have the power on, you may not get a beep if this beep with motors button is checked. So oftentimes when I'm working with customers, I will actually uncheck this just to make sure that we get a beep. So if you didn't get a beep, come here, uncheck this, then go back and try it again, okay? So now I'm going to come back here. I'll go back into IMU Calibration Helper, and I want to start working on the accelerometer calibrations. So the frame IMU over here, let me go ahead and click on that one because this one's fairly easy. And you'll notice here that this box says that I'm going to be doing the ACCZ, or the Z direction here. And if I were to actually move this like this, you would notice that it is automatically picking which is the correct direction. Okay. And so there's no check boxes here, which means nothing's been calibrated. Okay. I'm actually going to go ahead and just hit reset anyway. And then I'm going to come in here and click this calibrate button. On here, this whole box over here is for the gyroscope, and this one over here is for the accelerometer. So I'm going to go ahead and hit calibrate here for the accelerometer. And we don't need any kind of special orientation for this. In fact, many of you who have been using firmware version 2.43b6 might be used to actually having to turn this up like this and rest it here. You do not need to do that. Not only do you not need to do it, but you cannot do that for this version. You have to have it sitting flat on the table for this firmware version, and we'll go ahead and hit calibrate. Okay. Now you'll notice here that we actually get a little check mark here, and that tells us that we've done this. Now the nice thing about this is we're just doing one side. This is what would be called a one-sided calibration. We're going to do a six-sided calibration now. I'll click over to the camera IMU, which remember is in this box here. Now this is important to remember where it is, because when you have, I often tell people that to think of this like a Rubik's Cube, right? There's 6 sides to this, and each side needs to be up one time for this. So we'll have the 6 sides, and each time we're going to go ahead and hit the calibrate button. So the first one, of course, is always with the LEMO port straight up. Now if you have a standard helix, you might have an SDI port coming out the top of this, and you need to make sure that the SDI port is up. Okay. And a little bit of a practical tip here. Here in the shop, one of the things that we'll do is we'll actually use a piece of tape. You'll notice here, I mean, some of you might have noticed that when we move this, it has a tendency to move in little steps here because there are, of course, magnets inside these electric motors. And so we might get it exactly level where we want it, and then it doesn't quite stay. And so we'll often go ahead and put a piece of tape, and we'll tape it right here between this crack here, the moving part of the motor and the part that does not move, the rotor and stator, and we'll actually tape it into position. Now, I prefer to use a level if I have one handy. Many of you have them, many of you don't. If you don't have a level, I find that you can get a pretty good calibration. It's not going to be quite as good, but it'll be pretty close. You just have to be really careful about it being level. And of course, many of you have, because of your profession, have trained eyes for this kind of thing. I, of course, do not. So I'm going to cheat and use a level in this case. And once I get this level, I will tape it down. Okay. And you can, of course, see the tape here going across these 2 parts of the motor. And now, you'll notice here that I actually have 6 check marks here, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reset this all. Okay. And great. It resets the, and I'll go ahead and turn the motor off there by clicking the menu button once. Now, of course, the check marks are gone on here, and so I can go ahead and recalibrate. Now, do not mess with the temperature calibration. You know, we've done some a little bit of preliminary work on temperature calibration, and we found that it really does not help that much. You know, I mean, if you're going to be doing a lot of filming, going inside, outside, in the Arctic or something, you know, some kind of crazy environments, then, you know, maybe give us a call and we kind of talk through that. But in general, you don't need to worry about the temperature calibration. Okay. So now I have the box picked out, it's level, I can go ahead and hit calibrate here. And don't want to be touching it while I'm doing that. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And of course, this one does not want to stay perfectly level, but I'm going to level it up here using my level. And tape it. And then I'm going to hit calibrate. You'll notice that it's already selected a separate axis. And I'll move on to the next one here. And go ahead and put this on here. Get it level. You can kind of see it's level there. Tape it. Go ahead and do this one. Now notice, let's say I forget which direction I'm going and I come back to here, and you can realize that I actually have this little blue box here around something with a check mark. So I've already done that. So it's a great, this calibration helper can be a nice reminder of what you've done and what you haven't. Okay, so again, I'll come in here, I'm going to use the level, get the bubble in the center, put the tape on, and I'll hit calibrate. Okay, now of course I'm going to do the last two. I don't need tape or level for those. I will go ahead and hold this down to the table. I just hold it down with the palm of my hand here, and then you can be a little bit careful. Okay. Okay, and of course the other direction here. Now when I lay this on the table here, I'm going to be a little bit careful. I'm actually using Bluetooth, which is why I have the battery plugged in. And so I just want to make sure that this cable is coming off the end of the table, just so it's perfectly flat here. If you have a screw here holding your battery cage in, then go ahead and take that out, okay? Because that might make things a little bit more uneven there too. In some cases, I've actually been able to, hold just this section here against the table if you have a really good table. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit calibrate. Okay. And now, okay, so that part is done. You look at that and hit close here. Okay. Now, one of the things I have noticed about this version of the firmware is it doesn't always get rid of this accelerometer is not calibrated, but this message down here. So what you may need to do here is actually just go ahead and quit the GUI, and if you come back in, I think that you'll find that it is actually going to go ahead and shut this off, and then I'll turn it back on, and we'll turn off the motor with one click of the menu button. Since I'm using Bluetooth, I'll select this one, connect. This is actually a little slow in connecting. Normally it only takes a second or two. There, instead of 3 or 4. Okay, and now you'll notice here that the accelerometer not calibrated box is gone. So you may need to actually restart the GUI in order to make sure that that message is gone on when you're doing the calibration in 2.56b2. And that should be it. You've got just a review here. We do the calibration, we use the IMU calibration helper here, right? We do 4 different types of calibrations. We do 2 gyros, and we did a one-sided calibration on the frame IMU and a 6-sided calibration on the camera IMU. And that should be it. And if we come over here to our monitoring tab, if we were actually go ahead and check this out, with the bubble level, you'd find that our calibration is right on the money there, that our gyro is right on the money, and if we switched over to frame IMU over here, we would see the same thing. That we're well within tolerances, and that's how you do it. Now, if you're using the iPhone app here, the iOS app, you can actually go ahead and there's a way to calibrate in here as well. Simply come down here on the main menu, come down to the orientation calibration, click on that, And you'll notice, of course, that you have 4 options here for selecting calibrate the camera gyro, the frame gyro, camera accelerometer, frame accelerometer. And so you can just press the appropriate button. Let's say, for instance, you want to calibrate the camera gyro. Go ahead and just click that button. You can come over here, calibrate the frame gyro. You can click the calibrate the frame accelerometer. And of course you have the camera accelerometer. Now, as with the simple BGC GUI, you're still going to want to put it in the 6 different positions, and each time click the camera accelerometer button here, okay? So I would go ahead and put it in the home position with the SDI port, or if you have the junior, the 2 LEMO ports straight up, click the camera accelerometer once, rotate it 90, click the camera accelerometer button again, 90 again, 90 again, then face down and face up, and that's how you do the calibration. It's that simple. Thanks.